So we've had to do a little bit of a rethink on our rear suspension here. I got the adjustable spring plates from Elephant Racing, and I was test fitting this one, and when I tried to push it in to the inner splines, it pushed the torsion bar on the opposite side out. So then I started looking. I compared this spring plate to the factory one, and it turns out they're shorter. So here they are next to each other. It's a new spring plate. This is the original 944 spring plate, and yeah. So what that means is, I called Elephant Racing and talked to them for a while. Got some actually really good suspension advice. So that's why we're kind of rethinking the suspension a little bit here. So these, they designed to use on a 944 or 911. Apparently they're interchangeable, but you have to use a 911 torsion bar. And they sell, Elephant sells hollow torsion bars and, you know, springs and pretty much everything else for the suspension on 944s and 911. So we got to talking for a little bit, and one of the reasons we went down this whole road of rebuilding the rear suspension was I got a good deal on these 30mm sway bars. And in our conversation of what spring rates you run for what, he pointed out that the 944 Spec Racing Series uses, and this is, you know, track only cars that aren't street legal or anything, he says they use a 30mm rear bar and a 400-pound front spring. So that's probably about as stiff as you want to go for a track only car. And I told them what I was planning on running was these 30mm bars and these 350-pound springs. And most of these people are in California that sell this stuff, so you have to. I made it clear to him that I live in Pennsylvania, where we have things called holes in the road, and bumps, and roughness, and and also that this is not going to be a track car. It's going to be a daily driver that we will take to the track once or twice a year. And he said that, yeah, you probably want something a little less stiff than 30mm. So if you remember, I think it was probably the first or second video, I said we would be changing the rear torsion bars from the 24s, that's a stock 24 one there for reference next to the 30, to something like 27 or 28 or 26 or 27, because that was kind of my gut feeling. That was about where we wanted to go. And I got a deal on the 30mm, so we went with that. But after buying these spring plates, and I definitely want to use these to have the adjustability, because that's kind of important. And it's actually really important. So after talking with the guy at Elephant Racing and talking about spring rates and stuff, I decided to bite the bullet and buy a set of their 28mm hollow torsion bars and a set of 275-pound per inch springs. So yeah, now we gotta wait for that stuff, but I think I'm very confident now in the end we will end up with something that's not way too stiff for me to drive every day, you know, because having one of these things with a rock hard race car suspension, yeah, 30 plus years ago that would have been the thing that I would be into and not cared. I would have just drove it, but I'm a lot older now. I don't really want to be bounced around all the time. So that's what we're going to do, and I'm sure it'll work out really well. The only problem is it'll take, I don't know, probably by Monday at the earliest I'll have them. So that kind of pushes back a couple of projects because the rear suspension's all apart right now, which means the brakes aren't together, which means we can't fill up the brake system, which means we can't do the pre-bleed on the clutch master cylinder until this stuff's all put back together. And there's the issue of the clutch. We're only waiting on the clutch to put the engine in. That's it. So hopefully that'll be here sometime in the next week. So basically the rear suspension's got to be back together before we can put the engine in too, because we got to have the brakes connected, get the master cylinder full, get a pre-bleed done on the throw-out bearing before we can put the engine onto the belt housing permanently. So yeah, that's where we are now. We'll be pecking away at some of the front suspension stuff, I guess, while we're waiting for all this stuff. And that's the suspension update.